We'll give everybody just a minute to get settled back at their computer, and then Kathleen will start us off.
Okay. I hope we're all back. Welcome back. I hope everybody had a wonderful lunch. And before we get started with our next session, I would like to introduce some very special people who are here with us. First is Jonathan Permar, Director of Social Studies. Give it a wave, Jonathan. And then Natalie Strange, the Director of Library Media Services. Give us a wave, Natalie. And Nancy Cravey, the District School Library Media Coordinator. We are so excited that y'all are here, and I hope that you have some greetings to bring to us.
I will just hop in very quickly and say I have loved this every single opportunity that we get to do it. So I'm excited to see this continuing and navigating these unprecedented times as we try to figure out new ways to figure out how to bring these wonderful banks of information, resources, and skill sets to our teachers. I'm also really just enjoying scrolling through and seeing some familiar names and faces. A shout out to my social studies teachers, having gotten to see you nearly enough this year, and I miss seeing you and being in your classrooms, and I can't wait to see you in the fall. And I am so glad that you took some time out of your schedule to do this. One of the best things that I love about this is that time and time again, we are bringing together these collaborative teams between social studies, ELA, and our library media specialists who, if y'all know me by now, I just think they're walking banks of ridiculous amounts of knowledge and resources at all given times, and are such amazing assets for us to rely on. And so I think it's great that we're bringing together these collaborative teams. And what's really cool is that over the course of time, we've gotten to do, I mean, it's got to be at least 4 or 5 of these by now specific to GCS. And so we're all building a really common base of knowledge with which to approach these issues that we can kind of carry with us as we are working together in our schools and working with other colleagues and other schools around our district. So I'm just really excited about all of this, and I'm so thankful for our partners today for being here. This literally couldn't happen without you. So thank you for doing the work that y'all are doing, and thank you to our amazing teachers and library media specialists for being here. And now I'm turning over to Natalie, who is like my hair twin today.
Thank you. I do try and style myself after Jonathan just a bit. So, and really in many ways, when I think about Jonathan as a teacher and as a collaborator, I think that he does such a good job bringing information together and really making it accessible to our teachers and to our students, talking about what's happening in our society and making it real. So I appreciate all of you being here today. Thank you so much to our partners. Every time I attend one of these workshops, I love being able to dig into our primary sources and be a thought partner in different ways that we can utilize those resources in active learning opportunities. It really initiates those collaboration pieces, which may be a step easier in person. I love how you have turned this and made it work in this virtual environment. And I'm so pleased to see representatives from different departments working together, and hope that this shows how we can continue this process and utilize some of the devices that are in our students' hands now as we move forward and think about future years as a true one-to-one district. Thank you to everyone. Nancy, I know, has enjoyed being here as well. She's muted right now. Since we're in the same room, we get a little bit of an echo effect. So to try and keep things clear, please reach out if you have questions after this workshop, and we're glad to support you from the district level as well.
And if you haven't, make sure you fill out your paperwork for Tammy. I'm going to do a plug for that. I don't know if everybody's got it over there to you, Tammy, but I know you want it.
And the survey. This is a shameless plug for it all.
Yes, do it. Make sure you do it. We need all of that. Those are all critical things that need to happen, folks. So if you haven't done it yet, please make sure you fill out your paperwork and make sure you do the survey so that we have some great feedback for this work that we're doing.
Okay, thank y'all for being here. It's very great to see you. Okay, we've got a few minutes, and we just thought that we might have a quick conversation with everybody about kind of what resonated with you this morning. Did something really get you excited? Did you get ideas for something that you could do in the classroom? Just kind of what was exciting for y'all? Does anyone want to step up and talk about it?
Hi, let me get my camera turned on. Sorry, it was slow to come on. My name is Samantha Troxler, and one of the things that I enjoy about coming to this type of professional development is that it allows you to remember what it feels like to be the student in the classroom, which I think is always important because I'm always trying to remind myself how do my students feel right now. And so one of the things that resonated with me was how difficult it is to think critically about primary sources quickly, because we were working very fast in the small groups. And I even caught myself, or my group members caught me making an assumption about one of the documents. And so somewhere along the way in the critical and thinking process, I assumed that one of my documents was a male author. And I don't know why, but it just kind of reminded me of how hard it is, I think, for some of our students sometimes when we do ask them to do things, but we don't give them the time to really think through what we're asking them to do. And also how easy it is, not just for students, but for us as teachers to sometimes make an assumption about something unconsciously and have to kind of go back and think through something critically again. So I just, it's fun to kind of work through those complexities.
That's a great point. Thank you so much. Anybody else?
I've really enjoyed the last session, the different artifacts. I can't wait to look at the Padlet to see what everybody had, but group 3, I really enjoyed our conversation and just the way that we discussed making things, just the connections. I thought that was great. And I'm super excited to actually use some of these artifacts. So that's great. And I look forward to working with, hopefully with the social studies department as well. I'm in the English department and we have some social studies representation from my school. So that's exciting and I'm thankful for them.
Thank you for that comment. And I think we're all kind of coming back to the fact that these primary sources are exciting. And I think the excitement it generates in us, it generates that in students too. I know when I'm having classes and they come in and they see things out on the tables, they're really excited not only to get their hands on it, but to do some real interpretation themselves. And I think that that's really kind of explains to them what the difference is between the primary and secondary sources. It's their interpretation. What about somebody else?
What I took away from it is that I feel like at the beginning of next year, no matter what I'm teaching, and I'm a social studies teacher, by the way, I'm going to do a fake news boot camp, maybe for 2 days, analyzing sources, what's a replicable source, and going through all those, because I assume kids coming to me already knew how to do that through their English classes. But with everything that's going on right now, I think I'm just going to do a refresher course for them and myself so that we won't get so embedded down by the middle of the year if they don't know something, or they do an incorrect source, it's not so detrimental. So so I'll be doing a boot camp at the beginning, starting fresh off with how to use primary source documents. So as we go through the year, we won't have any misconceptions.
What a great idea. That's really wonderful. Kind of start, you're right on the mark, starting it off early, so you don't get mid-year and realize that they don't get it. It's a great idea. Anybody else?
Well, sometimes I get bogged down thinking that I have to create this very elaborate, prepared lesson. And I thought that was a lot of fun, just to compare two different pamphlets, for example, or looking at historical photographs, and just in very short lessons or mini lessons, making a point about how to look for appropriate, accurate information.
That's a great point, Heidi. And I think there's so many great resources out there now. There's so many things being digitized with great metadata that we have so many great choices now to bring into the classroom. And I think someone's going to cover this later, but I think Kelly, but there's even a lot of sites now that, for example, Library of Congress, DPLA, that have primary resource sets that are for the teachers that are great resources as well. And kind of, even if you don't follow them exactly, it kind of can give you ideas and jumpstart creativity.
To just piggyback a little bit on what Heidi was saying too, I think hopefully this is allowing you to like see some of the benefits of just really tucking into sources and doing source work. You don't have to have a really super big lesson to do it. A key tenet in the new social studies standards that are coming down is this idea of inquiry, which is what a lot of what we've been doing is feeding into, is how do you do inquiry effectively? And so like asking one question and using 3 different sources to answer it. Right. And that's not taking a lot of development, right? Just a lot of cool resources, and finding resources that are impactful can help students digest a key concept.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else want to say anything? We're about to go into the next session, but we probably have time for one more comment. Okay, then I think that I will take this opportunity to introduce our next session, which is with Kelly for online resources. Oh, I think you're muted, Kelly.
Okay, so while Kelly deals with some tech issues on her end, trying to get her mic back up and running, let's just let's think a little bit more about any ideas that anyone might have had for incorporating some of these activities into the classroom, whether it's just going to be doing an exercise like we had done with primary sources, or a boot camp for fake news. Think about that. That's something that we're going to dig a little deeper into later on in the afternoon. But if anybody has anything quick to share while Kelly is getting her mic back up and running, I'm happy to hear it.
I'm not sure if it's still popular as it was like at the beginning of the school year, but I think that some sort of like fake news game in the style of Among Us, if anyone knows what that is. I know the kids really like it. It's this game where you have to figure out who like the fake person is or the imposter is. And so incorporating it into games that they know and love could be a fun. I like the idea of doing this stuff at the beginning of the year, like setting this expectation from the start.
That sounds great. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Kelly, let us know if, nope, can't hear you.
That's a great idea about bringing them in early. And we have a lot of teachers at UNCG that do the same thing. They like to bring their students to the archives, you know, first thing, so they can really get an idea of what a primary source is and how to work with them and how to use them in research and writing. So that's a great idea. Kelly, are you back? I saw her briefly.
I have a quick question. What kind of things do you have in the archives at UNCG? I went to a conference at UNC Chapel Hill and was just amazed at the amount of items that you can go and go through. And if I was to bring a group to UNCG, what type of items do you have in the archives that we would be able to kind of sift through?
Oh, we would love that. We would love to get all of y'all. Well, gosh, we have a lot of things. We have, again, I think it's great that we have a lot of things digitized, but a lot of things are not. So we have, gosh, we have a woman veterans collection that has about 700 mini collections about women in the military from the First World War to current conflicts. And that is uniforms and diaries and scrapbooks and letters. And speaking of scrapbooks, we have almost 400 scrapbooks at UNCG that our students love because they're from when the school opened in about 1897 to current, you know, till, I guess, 10 years ago. And the students love to kind of go through and see what college life was like at the time. So we have a lot of school history. Oh gosh, we just have so many things that are so engaging with the students. We have a really large performing arts collection that our students love to look at. So anything from playbills to broadsides. So I mean, we have just absolutely, and I've even gotten into the rare books. So we have wonderful things. And if you want to give me a call, I would love to talk to you about how we could kind of tailor the visit to something that y'all would be interested in or something that you're teaching, whatever unit you're teaching.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yay.
Ah, great. I am so sorry. I get to be the outlier today. All righty, one moment. Let me share my screen again. That was fun. Not really. Great. Okay, can you see my PowerPoint? Perfect. Okay, great. All right. Well, so I just wanted to say, apropos of what Jonathan and Natalie said, that we hope to contribute to all of your personas as walking informational banks today. And we also want you to think of us as your thought and curriculum partners as well. And we can help you with your research as librarians. We can help you save your time. And so the next 35 minutes are going to be probably the least interactive part of your day today. This is going to be a lightning tour. I wish I could do a Vulcan mind meld. That would probably be easier. But this is going to be a lightning tour of, you know, some of those well-curated go-to places to find primary sources to make your job easier, and as trusted sites that may stick in the minds of your students, you know, as you're trying to get them to learn these online landscapes as well. So it's going to be fast, and so you should strap your seatbelt on. Excuse me. And I'm not, in the interest of time, I'm not going to be doing tours of these resources. It's just going to be a broad overview, just to, if you're not familiar with them, just to kind of plant the seeds. And in our last session of the day, you'll have a much longer chance to break out with your colleagues to talk about all the things that we've shared today in these resources and explore them for 45 or so minutes. And hopefully that'll satisfy that urge to start digging in. So the first resource that I want to start with is NCpedia. And NCpedia, if you're not familiar with it, is the state's online encyclopedia, and it's organized here at the state library, and it's been around for a couple decades in various incarnations, and it currently has more than 8,400 articles of secondary source learning content. And, and that covers a broad range of North Carolina history, including biographies, county history, African American history, Native American history, women, business, agriculture, arts and culture, social history, and natural heritage, as well as now we have a small collection of 40 entries on basic historical information about North Carolina that have been translated into Spanish. So we're glad to offer that these days. And NCpedia now also has a small but growing collection of resources written specifically at the 4th to 6th grade level, and hopefully geared toward topics discussed in the curriculum. The resource also contains primary source materials spread widely throughout. And sometimes those come in the form of an historical image that is providing additional context or value to an entry. Other times it's long lists of primary sources that are connected to an entry, and also links to digital collections online that are apropos of a topic. So it's really a great place to go if you're looking especially for resources, primary sources that are related to North Carolina history. If right now we're looking at the home page, and there is a blue text at the top for selected North Carolina topics. Under that link, there's a collection of probably more than 20 topical browsing collections where resources have been brought together so that you can see the breadth of resources associated with a topic. And many of those also have primary sources linked directly into them. Additionally, many pages, including a lot of those subject browsing pages, have educator resources and lesson plans that are connected with them as well. Many at the 8th grade level, some at the 4th grade level, and some at high school as well, but primarily at the 8th grade level. Additionally, NCpedia has an educator resources page, and that link is available on the blue menu bar at the top of every page. That is a fairly, I would say, robust and well-developed page for educators. It has a number of resources to support your work, including a curriculum crosswalk tool that links the North Carolina standards with relevant NCpedia content. There is access to the NCDPI remote learning site, access to K-8 content in NCpedia that's aggregated specifically for that age group, links to resources for fast facts, and as well as the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources blogs. There are many historical and information blogs now that can be a great complement to very short secondary content that also includes primary sources. There are a number of other resources on that page, but one additional one is we have recently launched an interactive quiz feature, and we now have, I think, 10 interactive quizzes that are on a number of topics that are popular topics in North Carolina history, including North Carolina state symbols, sports figures, food and foodways, and nature and animals and things like that. And those are all written at the 5th grade level as well. And each of those interactive quizzes also results in a little a little learning content set that can be easily read and printed at the end. So hopefully teachers and students might enjoy that as well. And I think Jen might have mentioned this morning that we have live librarian chat from our reference librarians here at the library that's available Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. And so if you see that yellow Ask a Librarian sign up there, you'll know that librarians are online and eager to help both teachers and students. And the next thing we'll talk about is Anchor. The Anchor resource is located with a tile on the homepage, and you can always just click that to get there and access Anchor. And some of you may be familiar with the old Learn NC North Carolina digital history textbook that was produced and maintained by the UNC School of Education for many, many years, probably nearly 20 years, I think. And a few years ago, we incorporated that resource into NCpedia, into the platform, and it was renamed as Anchor, a North Carolina history online resource. And this resource is a comprehensive historical telling of North Carolina's history by chapter, from the history of its earliest peoples into the 21st century. And it is organized in a book chapter and subchapter and page format. It includes transcriptions of primary source documents, many of which are directly related to North Carolina history. It also includes digitized images now of those primary source transcriptions. So another great place to find primary source content. And then during the latter half of 2020, we also began adding new content into the resource. And it is currently under update and enhancement, and will be, I suspect, for some time, as we try to increase the relevance to North Carolina curriculum and representing more of the diversity of historical content for the state. And so we added more than 15 new entries to that suite. And some of them actually are very relevant to topics that we've talked about today. There's a wonderful article on the women of Bennett College, Unsung Heroes of the Civil Rights Movement, again, written at the 6th to 8th grade level, and religion in the Civil Rights Movement, African-American involvement in World War I. We have economic change, labor unions. There's some new entries on that. We talked about Polly Murray this morning in Dr. Johnson's talk, and there is a new entry about Polly Murray and 20th century freedom movements, which is a wonderful article for students to really get a contemporary perspective on Polly Murray's amazing life, and some other articles associated with history moving into the mid to late 20th century. Many pages have been enhanced with additional related topics, additional primary sources that have been linked, as well as just links to digital collections in general. So I would say it's a pretty robust resource and pretty comprehensive in its treatment of North Carolina history. And again, currently also under update. North Carolina digital collections. This is a topic that we could spend probably a whole hour on, but I'll just give you a quick flavor. This is the digital collections of the State Library and State Archives of North Carolina. It is a collaborative project between the two of us, and it now has more than 100,000 records in it. So it's a huge collection that spans North Carolina state government publications from the 18th century to the present, federal and state constitutional materials, governor's papers, General Assembly records, historical North Carolina newspapers from the 18th century. There's a veterans oral history collection. And then there's a vast range of subject collections that you can explore from the homepage, but a few of them that I think are unique and specialized, especially in state digital collections, are we have Our State magazine that's been digitized with back issues from the 1930s, I think now to 2017. And I always find that's a fabulous resource as a window into the past about what kinds of topics were important to people. When they read magazines, there's a lot of local color and local history that's represented in our state magazine. So I think it's fascinating both as, again, like a secondary and a primary source. It could really be used both ways. Wildlife in North Carolina magazine. The Wildlife in North Carolina magazine has also been digitized with back issues up to, I want to say we're up to 2015 now, but it may be a few years beyond that. That is produced by the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, and that is a high quality publication that could have broad application in elementary classrooms and beyond. There's a North Carolina State Parks History Collection with really, really fabulous images from the history of the founding of the earliest parks to the present day. History of African American education, food, cooking, others. The site includes numerous formats, historical photographs and publications, letters, pamphlets, newsletters, manuscript materials from the state archives, posters, historical posters, and it can be filtered and browsed in many ways by location, time period, agency creator, and others. So that's just a great place to dig in and I think enjoy yourself. The State Archives in North Carolina has a fantastic Flickr site with collections from its photographic archives. And this is a very large collection, and it has been organized by topics and albums. So there are many ways to explore it. Some of the collections include images from the News and Observer photographic archives, which are held at the state archives. And there are just some fabulous, amazing, really, historical images of counties, towns, the era of development of urbanization and infrastructure in the state, just to really have a window back into time, even for comparative purposes with today. Images from military conflicts, including the Civil War, Spanish-American War, World War I and World War II. There are even images of historical holiday cards, which I always find fascinating, just from an image and artistic point of view, for that interdisciplinary perspective with arts and visual imagery, as well as for basketball fans, historical NCAA men's basketball photographs. I've never looked at those because I don't watch basketball. I'm the only person in North Carolina. But that's a fabulous, fabulous site if you're looking for historical images, and it's well organized so that you can make your work efficient. The State Archives also has, excuse me, an educator page similar to the one that we have in NCpedia. This is a great page. It's been recently updated. It includes resources for working with primary sources in the classroom. It has a virtual tour of the state archives that was created for pandemic era learning. So you can see the state archivist down in the vault where the North Carolina historical documentary treasures are kept, and she displays some of those in the virtual tour, which is really fascinating. It also includes virtual field trips, online exhibits, podcasts, and various resources like that. There's also a link here to a site called NC Learn, not to be confused with the old Learn NC that I just mentioned a few weeks ago, totally separate. This is actually a searchable database of educational resources, lesson plans, and so forth that can be searched. And it looks across agencies in the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. So that's sort of broad between state parks, state archives, state library, science museum, zoo, and so forth. So that's a really nice resource. And so the next stop is Greensboro. And I know Kathleen, when I was having my technical issues, was talking a bit about the collections at UNCG, where she is. And she may have already said everything I'm about to say, but I'll say it again. UNCG has a fabulous suite of digital collections that they've made available online, both for the history of UNCG as an institution, the local history of the Triad and Piedmont, as well as other historical areas that they collect. And they include North Carolina women's veteran history and oral histories. That project includes photographs, letters, diaries, uniforms, and as well as published and unpublished materials for women in service since World War I. I've used that collection many times for projects, and it's wonderful. Their manuscript collections include a range of sources that document and preserve history of the Piedmont. They have collections of art, music, literature, civil rights, education, nursing, theater, women's studies. So really a broad range of topics. And they also have a wonderful performing arts collection, I think, which would be very valuable for that interdisciplinary perspective, both for music and art. And it includes a wonderful collection of performing arts, ephemera, and iconography, broadsides, playbills, scrapbooks, posters, just visual materials that I think could really be delightful in the classroom for students. And they also, I learned this week when I was updating my slides, that they also have more than 500 pieces of sheet music that are in the public domain. And as a musician, I was very excited to see that. They've also curated some online exhibits for local history, including a project called Pride of the Community, a documentary history of the LGBTQ communities in the Triad region. And that's a wonderful exhibit to share.
Thanks for the plug, Kelly.
No problem, Kathleen. I use that site so often that I feel like I live in it sometimes. The North Carolina Digital Heritage Center is another, it's one of our go-tos, and it's probably, if you're not familiar with it, it's probably one of our favorites because it has done so much for making visible local and county history across North Carolina. And actually, I just wanted to get kind of a show of thumbs up for how many people have used resources from the North Carolina Digital Heritage Center. Any thumbs up? Oh, Colleen. Okay, Christopher. Cool. Well, I'm glad that a few of you have used it, and I'm glad to be sharing something new that you haven't used before. And so the North Carolina Digital Heritage Center is a project of many partners, and the goal was to bring digitization of historical and heritage materials for North Carolina's county and local history, for general research and education. And it is, I think, one of the most wonderful places that we could go to look for primary source information. It includes a large yearbooks project that encompasses both high school and college yearbooks. It includes North Carolina newspapers. That also includes a collection. I think there are 3 papers in there for the African American community now. And the model has been that the Digital NC has partnered to get permission to digitize these materials that are still in copyright and make it available for research and educational purposes online. So, to be able to, look at local papers, Greensboro paper, Pitt County papers, Not the NNO, not the Charlotte Observer. Those are bigger urban papers, but our local news history is now available, which is great. And I just did something that I didn't mean to do, of course. And the collection is growing. Every year they work with new partners or existing partners to deepen the collections that they already have. And images, I think that they're now up to almost 25,000 images that have been included. Memorabilia, including scrapbooks and other items like that, other items of ephemera. There is a moving image and audio collection now, and it's just, I personally can't say enough about it. It's probably the other resource that I use more than any other when I'm looking for doing research and looking for local information, and to bring that local historical context to the stories and the narratives that you're sharing with your students. So the next one is Digital Public Library of America, and DPLA, if you haven't used it, is an online library that aggregates holdings of digital collections from institutions, museums, libraries, large and small, across the country. And North Carolina has partners with DPLA. And for example, items from the North Carolina Digital Heritage Center are included in the DPLA database, as well as other institutions that have shared their records upward so that people can go to one site. So if you ever, think of one place to go to DPLA, because you can put your hands on items, from North Carolina and across the country. And another wonderful feature that they have is primary source sets. And they have included primary source sets for a number of historical topics. And I believe that someone mentioned fake news in the sharing after lunch, and they have actually an historical primary source collection for fake news. So it's really a fabulous site. And if you're just searching the collection in general, it can be filtered by the type of item, by the copyright and usage rights of something. If you're just looking for things in the public domain, if you're looking for things from North Carolina, if you're looking for things about women, if you're looking for images of artifacts or objects of material culture, you can search across all of those kind of modes. So the last stop on our lightning tour is will be the Library of Congress and the National Archives. And both the National Archives and the Library of Congress have also created very nicely developed hubs to support classroom work and to bring primary sources and assistance for teaching with primary sources into your classroom. And in response to the pandemic, they've also both updated their offerings and their sites to include resources specifically for virtual and at-home learning. Which I think is fabulous, because those resources I think are very nicely, they're very nicely done. They also include resources for professional development, resources to help teachers with skills for teaching online. They include resources for working with family history activities with students. And the National Archives also has a new site called Docs Teach. And I actually recently just stumbled on this because it's very new, that provides much more of a database access to primary source documents in their collections that have been digitized. And it includes multiple features for browsing by era, by topic, by document type. It has ready to use activities, but it also has a new tool that you can use to create your own activities on the site using primary sources. And you have to sign up for it. It's no cost to access, but you do have to have a login. And I had actually just recently discovered this a couple of days ago, and I haven't had a chance to search it myself, but it looks intriguing to have such a thing that you could actually use to potentially cherry pick the resources that you want to use to create an activity. So I'm kind of excited to look into that myself. And again, the Library of Congress provides a similar assortment from its own collections of primary sources that have been organized into sets around various historical topics. And I am a personal fan of the Library of Congress. Their digital collections are also fabulous. The photographic archives are an amazing source of all kinds of images, you know, going back a few hundred years to, you know, contemporary digital photography. So it's fantastic. The last thing that I want to leave you with is a research guide that we created at the State Library. No, not surprising. It's called GPS, Getting to Primary Sources. And that is designed to help support you in, you know, kind of a one-stop shop for your classroom for doing this. And it has a tab for finding primary sources, a tab for some of the resources that we've presented for evaluating primary sources in the classroom, resources for using primary sources, and then links to a lot of the collections that we've mentioned today. And all of these resources, again, are included in the Padlet. So you can just take that away and, you know, bookmark it. And, you know, if you forget some of these things, you can just go right back there and find those. So I wanted to wrap this up with a little conversation at the end. First, to ask if you had any questions, to remind you that we are always here to help you. You can email us if you need research help. You can get us on chat, and we're always glad to help you find resources that will fit your need, your specific need. But I also wanted to ask folks if you'd be willing to share some of your go-to primary source collections that you're particularly fond of that have been really useful for you, or if you're just echoing that you've used these and they're your go-tos, that's great too. But you know, and feel free to, you know, just unmute your mic or share them in the chat. We'd love to hear about that. Fordham Modern, oh, Sheg, yes. Okay, let me look. Let me go back here. Whoops, it's moving too fast for me. Okay, Sheg. Okay, great. Yeah. So I have not heard of the Fordham Modern Source book. Does someone want to, Samantha, share that a little bit with everybody? I am not familiar with it at all.
Hi.
Yeah.
I was introduced to that when I was teaching. I was able to be an adjunct for a little while at the college level before I came into secondary education. And that was a resource that was shared with me by the department I was working with at the time. And it covers a wide range of topics. It would mostly be useful to a social studies or a history classroom. But I just, from the few times I've used it, I have seen where there are links to other things that might be useful to other classrooms or other conversations. And I had it pulled up so that I could just kind of share how it represents itself. It says it's a collection of public domain and copy permitted historical texts for educational use. Primary sources are available here primarily for use in high school and university or college courses. And then over on the left, it has it organized into categories of ancient, medieval, or modern history. It also has categories like African, Eastern Asian, Jewish, lesbian, gay, science, women. And so you can kind of apply the filters and just kind of start diving in. I've used it to just access text very quickly for my AP class.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I will add that to to my bank.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, and someone else, Jackie mentions using zanran.com for statistics. And so that I'm very curious about that, like the need for, you know, more statistical and graphic primary resources. Is there, you know, tell us more about that, because that's a question that I've always wondered about, but not sure exactly, you know, what kinds of materials would be the most useful.
Zanran was nice because you could type, it's kind of like a Google for statistics and graphs. And so you can type in a specific topic and it will bring up, and they'd have like little thumbnail icons of the graphs, and you can narrow the graphs and statistics down to a specific topic. And so I love that to help students kind of narrow down all the research into just, you know, something they were interested in. But when that website went down, I just haven't been able to find something similar. And I was just wondering if anyone else knew of any.
I see. Okay, so it's no longer active. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we do help folks with, at least from the North Carolina level, is access to statistics, you know, economic statistics, agricultural statistics. There are state-run resources for that, and but it certainly is more of something that you know, you would be looking at the data as opposed to, you know, sort of graphic representations. But that's a great reminder for us to look into data resources. Are there any particular sort of topics in that you know, you might direct students toward? Any specific sort of like domains of data, or?
It mostly had to do with whatever topic they chose for their graduation projects when we were doing graduation projects. And they would have to include a statistical or graph on their projects and finding those in a specific topic area.
Got it. Okay, great, thanks. Okay, Sheg again, Fordham, UPLA fake news. Oh, Francesca, thanks for adding that in there. Oh, yes. Okay, Jen, thank you for reminding me. So another important resource that the State Library and Archives provide is actually a access to archives of state government websites. And the project goes back probably into the 90s that the State Archives and the State Library have been archiving state government websites and social media. And the reason is really, you know, it's sort of a mandate, legislative mandate as our reason for being, to gather and preserve state government publications and state government records. And so our site, and I think that Jen included the link there, allows you to actually explore state government websites historically through the archive. And that project is crawled primarily through a service provided by Internet Archive called Archive It. And the State Library and Archives have an enormous collection of this government website archive. And it really is, it is a treasure trove of information. If, for example, if someone wanted to see, you know, what was state government, what was a particular state government agency doing in 2002, what kind of information were they posting on their website? What kind of reports were coming out of it? And in some cases, the website archives are also a great resource to find historical publications that were only put on a state government website. So it is an amazing resource. And if anybody is interested in using that portal and needs assistance, please feel free to let us know, and we would be glad to support you, because it is a vast collection and probably has a little learning curve, but we would be delighted to help you with that if you wanted, or just to share with your students that, yes, this is a thing, you know, preserving government information in all of its incarnations is an important function. So United States Holocaust Memorial, thanks for sharing that. Jen says, it's also great, the state government website archives, to find out information, what information state government was sending out by social media. Exactly. Like if you wanted to see, you know, what the communications were like during COVID, you know, that you could look back and see. So it's for research data, another fabulous use to look at things like that. So any others, any questions, ideas? No. Okay. Well, thank you for enduring the very quick tour of sites on the Eastern Seaboard. And we've got about thank you, Francesca. Please remember to fill out the PM sign-in form for your school coordinators, and that is located on the Google Drive. And I think Francesca just shared the link in the chat, and that would be fantastic if you would do that. And I'm no longer showing this. Okay. We have just a couple minutes left before the next session starts, and I will introduce that. And also just to remind you, the next session is going to be, have an interactive component, and then we'll go from that into the final session of the day. And Tammy will be introducing that for us, and that will be your teacher collaborative breakout, where you'll have a chance to stop listening to us and to talk to each other about your experience today and the resources that have been shared, and your ideas for how you might go back home and use them. And so actually we look forward to providing that session for you all at the end of the day. And I think that Mr. Hutchison is here, and yep. And if you want to, do you want us to share your slides, or are you going to share them?
I've got it. I can share my screen.
Perfect,
So
perfect, perfect.
I'll just, there we go.
Okay, great. And while he's doing that, I will introduce him. So we are very, 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 very thrilled to have with us today a teacher. And I think Jen had talked a bit about the dream of this grant project that allowed us to develop this model that we've worked together between the State Library and UNCG to develop. And one of our fervent hopes was that we would be able to have a teacher also present in this workshop. And so we got really lucky that Mr. James Shanda Hutchison agreed to share some important work and ideas with you today. And so James Shanda Hutchison serves as the Social Studies Department Chair at Green Hope High School, in Wake County, where he teaches AP US History and American Indian Studies. He was originally from West Virginia, and Mr. Hutchison has over 20 years of experience in secondary education, including schools in Massachusetts, Texas, West Virginia, and North Carolina. He also frequently works as a consultant, providing professional development sessions and writing curriculum, mostly for Wake County Public Schools, for the North Carolina Museum of History, and the Museum of the Southeast American Indian at UNC Pembroke. And so we're thrilled that he can share with you today, and also bring some other voices to this discussion table. And he'll be talking about adding voices to the chorus using document-based active learning to expand representation in the historical historical narrative. Thanks, and looking forward to your talk.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you for having me. And I just want to preface that I got overzealous. There's quite a bit here, And this is going to be my first time doing this with, I think we're all pretty comfortable and familiar at this point, whether we wanted to be or not, with living in this virtual world with students, but doing this sort of thing with other teachers is a first for me. So I don't know exactly how much feedback you're going to have and how long that might, questions and how long that might expand. So we will get through everything we can get through, but I've provided for you there on the Padlet, the slideshow that has links to the resources that I'm sharing today, as well as links there on the Padlet to lesson activities that we're doing here as well. So speaking of that, if you don't mind going here to this Padlet, got a question there for an opening discussion, and you can just kind of hit that plus sign, or you can do to add a comment onto my question there. Just be thinking about, as you worked to incorporate primary sources in your classroom experiences, and I know that these are teams of English teachers, ELA teachers, social studies, and media center folks. And so for some of you, it's you're curating, you're coordinating, you're trying to find sources that are appropriate to kids. For others of you, you're trying to find ways to incorporate them in your direct lessons. So what has been your biggest challenge? I'll give you a minute to respond to that there on the Padlet while I go ahead and talk about what is our agenda today. So for this next hour that we're together, I'm going to talk a little bit just briefly about why active learning, but also a central problem that we face when we're shifting to active learning using documents in the classroom. And then I'm going to focus on some ways to address that problem and mitigate as much as possible that problem and ease the transition and ease the shift and really make documents work for you and your students in your classrooms. And I've got a couple of example lessons that we'll look at and debrief, and then we'll kind of wrap things up with your thoughts and your questions. So just taking a look, finding them. Yeah. And they've been sharing a lot of great resources today. I know I did this kind of professional development with Kelly and Jen 2 years ago, something like that. And they were fantastic to work with, and they've curated a lot of great resources. I've reached out to them a couple of times, and they've been great to help me find things, but also just those online digital resources that they were sharing that you have access to are great. Yeah, older texts, antique language is the terminology, and I have motion sensor lights in my room, so that's why I suddenly went dark and it went really dim. But antique language is the way we talk about it with kids. It can be difficult, especially for less accomplished learners to tackle that. So they're going to need more scaffolding and support. Finding and using. So what are we doing with the sources once we get them, or what are students doing with the sources once they get them is a big question. Yeah. All right. So these are all real critical questions and problems we need to solve, but I really like this one, getting students to buy into the importance of using primary sources in the classroom, importance of using primary sources in their research, but also what I found as I transitioned my classroom away from sort of the traditional structures of more lecture-based and towards more active learning and hands-on learning. Students are very resistant to that. It takes them a while to adjust. So when we're talking about active learning, I'm sure you've heard it 100 times. What are the positives? What do we get out of active learning? It's promoting deeper understandings for students. They're making connections that they couldn't make otherwise. It's personalizing learning. It's letting them take it sort of from the theoretical and a real authoritative voice to a more personal interpretation. And that results in longer lasting learning. It results in stickier learning. When you do 6 months, when researchers have done like 6 months after the end of the class, let's do an assessment. How much has really been retained? Students retain much, much more, 60% more on average from active learning techniques than they do from the traditional textbook lecture kinds of things. It also helps address inequities in the classroom. Let's be honest, our textbooks are not built in an equitable way. When textbooks were finally pressured to start bringing in more voices with the sort of 90s multiculturalism, it became a very special page in the textbook. So you're important. Hey, Revolutionary era, there were women too. Here's one, you get a page, but they're not part of the main narrative. You were there, but you weren't important enough to make it in the main flow of the story. And that really registers with kids even on a subconscious level. In our discipline in social studies, because I teach social studies courses, AP US History and American Indian Studies, and we have a real problem of just fostering more voices because students don't see themselves in the history we teach. And so they tune out the history that we teach. I'm not there. I don't see anyone like me there. This is other people's history. Why would I be a part of that? And they don't then have that passion in a large sense to move on to studying history and college and coming back into the classrooms as teachers. And so we have that kind of continual marginalization of voices that results from that. Yeah, the textbook's very outdated. I know in our district, one of our competitor schools is using the American pageant. Now they're using the 2012 edition, which is bad enough on its own, but it doesn't matter which edition you're using. Even the most recent edition of American pageant for AP US History does not mention, for instance, the Enlightenment anywhere in the textbook, much less in the chapter on the Revolution, because the textbook was originally written in 1954. And as of its last revision, only 18 words have been changed since 1954 in the chapters dealing with the American Revolution. So scholarship that was done in the late 50s, connecting the ideas of the Enlightenment to the American Revolution in the critical period, didn't make it in that textbook. So are the voices of other more marginalized people really going to be represented? Well, likely not. And if they are, it again becomes, we get to the end of the chapter and we have a section that's obviously been tacked on. Here's what were happening for women. Here's what was happening for African Americans. Here's what was happening for American Indians, instead of it being woven into the story. So active learning helps address those inequities, develops highly transferable skills and knowledge, and creates more resilient learners because they've had to wrestle with problems over and over and strengthen the skills of dealing with confusion, dealing with frustration, and finding ways to work through that. Skills that you don't develop when it's sit, listen, take the notes. So there's a lot of reasons why we do it. There's also one really big problem, and that's the buy-in thing that I pointed out on the Padlet. Really recent research here, 2019, but it is supported by a metadata study that was done in 2020, looking at multiple pieces of research like this, and they've all found very similar things. If you ask students and if you ask teachers what they prefer and what they think they learned the most from, they go back to good lectures, like a teacher who can really stand up front and tell the story. They enjoy that. They read the slideshow and they copy it down word for word. They read the textbook and they copy it over in their own words, and they feel like they've learned stuff. They feel secure that I've got the facts that when I'm asked for them on the test, I'll have them in my memory to pull out. They are positive, but much less positive about their experience in active learning classrooms. They don't report that same feeling of, I learned, when I wrestled with documents, when I interpreted documents, when we discussed primary sources and secondary sources. They don't have that same kind of feeling. And teachers report feeling like they weren't sure if kids learned as much that way either. But when we subject that to actual assessment, what we find is that's a misperception. Students may think they learn more in traditional methods and less in the more active methods, but in reality, it's the other way around. 1.5 times less likely to fail the course, and a half a letter grade on average better overall score on assessments when they are learning that material through engagement with active learning. So obviously active learning works, but also obviously students are resistant to it. Why? That was the question this study sought to answer. And what they kind of came to the conclusion after interviewing these students is they don't like the struggle, and they think the struggle means they're failing, and they're not learning, and therefore that's bad, because it takes them a while and a lot of thought work and a lot of brain power and a lot of cognitive processing to get to the facts and the information. It's locked in your brain in a really powerful way, and you're able to recall that much, much more easily. But because it was work to get there, students feel like they didn't learn as much because they weren't getting fact after fact after fact that they record and it's there and I can memorize it. So how do we address that? How do we shift our classrooms to active learning when students say things like, well, you have to teach yourself, they don't really teach you? Parents tend to get resistant to that. Parents get resistant to active learning strategies. Well, why aren't you teaching? You should just teach. Equating teach with tell. So we do have some community things that we have to talk about to overcome, but the biggest thing is our classroom community. So that's what I want to do today, is give you some things that can help you in your classroom communities making this shift. So before we get into that, I want to see, have you experienced this sort of thing in your classroom as you've brought in primary sources? Have you heard these kinds of things? And if so, what's been helpful for you? And the ELA teachers, you're not going to have this as much because nobody's questioning reading To Kill a Mockingbird. Well, it's English class. Of course, you're going to be doing that and discussing it. Social studies, they really want us to just tell it. So this is a little bit more, this first part, a little bit more the social studies, I understand, but all of these strategies coming after will be really helpful for everyone here. So what have you found back here on the Padlet, our second column, second question? What have you found has been successful in addressing student concerns and student frustrations when they're working with documents, working with primary sources? And you don't realize it, but I have my timer going because I'm a timer kind of guy. So I've got a minute on my timer left now for you to fill in your thoughts. So I am perfectly comfortable. I teach high school students. I'm perfectly comfortable sitting in awkward silence for a little while to give up people the opportunity to fill the space with their thoughts. Yeah, that's good. The sort of coaching analogy. Yeah, and APUSH and the new curriculum adopted in 2015, and the new test is so built around skills-based things, analysis, argumentation. Yep, the growth mindset, transparent with the rationale. That's a really important one, like explaining why we're doing this, refreshing kids' memory on, remember, this is why we're doing this process. Here's what you're going to get out of it. Now we're moving to the next step. You kind of mastered what we were doing before. Now you're going to apply it at a deeper level than the next thing. Background information. So lecture still has a place. It just becomes less the central focus and more of building the context knowledge that students need to know to be successful. Relevance, the real world examples. Yes, exactly. And part of the 2 lessons examples that I have you here for you here use North Carolina voices and use women's voices and use issues that kids may be able to identify with a little bit more personally, but then you can expand it to larger scale issues. So yeah, the why. So here's a quick rundown of useful strategies. You have this PowerPoint, the slideshow that you'll have access to come back to these, but you've said a lot of these. Clear learning objectives. Here's the question we're going to be answering today, guys. Doing those engaging inquiry questions really encourages kids to work without them realizing that they've been encouraged to work. If you've got an interesting enough question, even if it's a question that they wouldn't have come up with on their own, or if you just ask them outside of the context of class, they might not have been that interested in. Once you've given them some historical context and you ask the question and they start getting into the sources, it becomes a real motivating, well, but wait a minute, what is the answer to this? So those clear objectives, engaging inquiry questions, when you're building your primary source activities right off the top, starting with those, setting the students' expectations. This is going to be tough, guys. You're going to have to work. You're going to have to think about this a lot, but it's okay because I'm here to help you and work through it with you. I'm going to be popping around to your teams while you're talking. If you have questions, if you have a signal system, some people use like different color Post-it notes or things to signal, hey, we've got a question, or hey, we're struggling. Frequent check-ins and letting them know, I'm going to check in with you because this is going to be tough. This language is antique language. It's difficult, but you can do it. Supporting them as they're struggling and celebrating the little victories as they're having them. Encourage them then to start building the skills. Like if you're struggling with antique language, just create a column in your notes where as you come to terms or phrases that were unfamiliar, once we figure it out with context clues, or I help you and fill in the details, write it down, define it for yourself so that you have it to come back to. So helping them realize our end goal is you're going to be creating, for instance, in a junior level English or history course, you're going to be creating your own arguments based on your own research at the end of this, whether that's a research paper or creating a digital portfolio or creating a podcast. Doesn't matter. At the end of this course, you are going to be taking all these skills that you've built and putting into practice by making your own argument, supporting and defending your own argument. So if they know what the end goal is, it's a whole lot easier to explain each step along the way, how it's contributing to the end goal. So you're constantly revisiting this. Someone mentioned something along this line in the Padlet, the engagement guides, heuristic engagement guides. I'm going to talk more specifically about what those are in a minute, but you would probably recognize graphic organizers as one example of that. So something hands-on where they can be organizing their thoughts and they can be guided and prompted in critical questions. And then metacognitive processes, helping students think about their thinking. So heuristic engagement guides. Some possibilities are graphic organizers, Venn diagrams, flowcharts, those sort of things. Think, pair, share discussion prompts are actually heuristic engagement guides. You're helping them build those critical thinking systems, those shortcuts to learning, the heuristics that help them look at a document and say, okay, if I'm always asking the document these questions, I'll be able to get to the answers that I need to get to at the end. Information retrieval charts are a part of it, or interpretive and questioning sequences. I have, if this little bar at the top will go away, and let me click on it. Here we go. Here's an example of a heuristic. Students have a set of sources linked here that are all advertisements from colonial newspapers for runaway enslaved and indentured servant. So they're going to go through these, and they're going to use an information retrieval chart to begin with to just analyze the documents. It's a heuristic because it's a thinking shortcut. It's going to record information here in a way that they can more easily identify patterns and similarities, where they can more easily identify, do comparisons and contrasts and those sort of things. So explain to them why they're doing the chart before they get it in the chart. And then that analysis is followed up with an interpretive questioning sequence, where they're taking the information they recorded here at the top, and they're pulling from it to try to answer some more, what do we know about the history of this time period through our analysis of these documents. And you'll notice that this one, I use a class blog, so often they will be reflecting on their learning at the end by, that's your homework, is you're going to write a class blog. You're reflecting on this overall question at the end. So they're starting to build the skills of developing arguments, supporting arguments with evidence in sort of a low impact way, a rehearsal way. I go onto their blogs, other kids go onto their blogs, and they give each other comments and the commentary on their blogs, and it gets them peer analysis, peer feedback, peer support. They listen to each other more than they listen to us, so we'll leverage that in the classroom. Here's another one that uses slave narratives. So this actually is 3 of them. Trying to remember who they were. It's Harriet Jacobs, and I have too many tabs open, so this is opening very slowly. But anyway, I'll just come back to this tab. It's 3 different slave narratives. Do we know who the ghostwriter is? Was there a ghostwriter? How do they describe work, family, culture? So again, we're doing an information retrieval chart and then following that with interpretive questions. This time, it's not ending in a blog, but it is ending in a class discussion where they're taking these slave narratives and then 4 other documents that they analyzed another day and some data on enslavement that they analyzed on a 3rd day. And in a 4th day, they're pulling all of that together in a class discussion and using that as evidence to both generate and respond to questions. So this is higher level, higher order stuff. It takes some scaffolding to get kids there, but these documents, these kinds of heuristic documents and the thinking questions kind of combine a lot of these heuristic skills, critical thinking skills, to get kids in a place where they're feeling more successful. They're able to measure progress one step at a time. Hey, we did the analysis. Hey, we did that interpretation. Now we can make bigger claims based on those documents. We did that with another set of documents. Now let's put those 2 together. So articulating those steps with them are important. That's the metacognitive processes. So literally helping students think about their thinking. Use active questioning while they're working in table teams, while they're working in individually, probing questions like, how do you know that? What evidence from the document supports that conclusion? So now that you've looked at these documents, what does it tell you about this issue, this topic, this time period, this problem America's faced, this theme and the human experience? So all of these connect to multiple disciplines. Exit tickets, warm-ups, if you're doing things that are like you're thinking about yesterday, what did you learn yesterday? What skills did you have to exercise yesterday to do the learning? What skills did you get to rehearse? Exit tickets as they're going out, or warm-up work as they're coming in. It can be written things. It can be little checkups like ungraded quizzes, and you can use Kahoot for that if you want to make it competitive ever so often and interactive. You can also be creative and let them ask them to illustrate it in a political cartoon, or use Flipgrid and make a short video, at least 30 seconds long, telling me how you learned what you learned today. Those sort of questions where they're having to think about their learning, whether you're showing them with the checkups and the ungraded quizzes and the Kahoots, you're showing them you did learn something. Look, this is what you learned. Look how well you did on this post-assessment. That gives them the boosts of confidence to say, hey, we are learning something here. Right after you finish an activity, the debrief shouldn't just be about the documents, but also should be about what did we learn, what skills did we rehearse. Team note-taking is one of my favorites, and I use this even in brief lectures. Don't take any notes, don't copy anything off the PowerPoint. My PowerPoints are usually just like 3 thinking bullets anyway, not tons of detail. So you're not writing any notes in this 5 minutes that I'm lecturing. When it's over, you're going to think about a question, and you're going to pair and you're going to talk about it. Then we're going to debrief as a class. And now, either as a class or as your team, you're going to decide what belongs in our notes. What was most significant? What was the biggest takeaways? What goes in our notes? You can do the same thing after a primary source analysis activity. We've spent 30 minutes looking at these sources. We've spent 30 minutes looking at these newspaper articles, looking at these journals, looking at these advertisements or slave narratives or whatever they are. So as a team, talk about what did you learn, how did you learn it, and decide what belongs in your notes. And give them time, pop around, help them, debrief as a class afterwards. This is going to take time. Don't expect to get through the same volume of material that you've gotten through in the past, but expect that the material you do get through, they will get it much, much more deeply. It'll be much stickier, and they're going to be able to recall it for a lot longer. And in multiple ways, they're going to be able to transfer this. So what you're looking for with primary source activities are representative things. So through looking at these primary sources, we can now extrapolate to the bigger picture. Or I gave you the historical background. How do these sources, primary and secondary sources, illustrate that? And I find it's really useful. Our APUSH, we have built each time period unit around an essential question. Time period 3 is the critical period, American Revolution. So the question is, how revolutionary was the American Revolution? So for a week and a half, that's our focus question. So we're looking at the causes and reasons that people rebelled. We're looking at other rebellions at the same time that failed. Thank you, Kelly, for helping pull that activity together for me. So they look at the Regulator Movement here in North Carolina, and they look at Shays Rebellion, and they look at the Whiskey Rebellion. All of these in the same time period, similar themes, similar ideas pushing the rebellion against similar forces. And yet the American Revolution was successful and the others were not. And the others were actually kind of decried by the powerful forces that drove the American Revolution. So why? What does that mean for our big question, how revolutionary was the American Revolution? We look at the participation of different marginalized groups on another day. We begin the whole unit, though, with the question and with the points of view of 4 historians. So they do a little historiography. They have secondary sources, 1 page front and back. It's excerpts, it's shortened, but how have different historians from different perspectives answered that question? It lets them know there's academic disagreement and there's academic conversation, and we can plot those points of view. Now we spend the next few days working topic through topic, issue through issue, who got rights and freedoms protected in the Constitution and who was left out, and whose lack of rights and freedoms were actually enshrined in the Constitution? Those sorts of questions, so that when we get to the end of the unit, they come back to the overall essential question and decide, where do I fall on that? Since we're constantly coming back to the questions, it keeps kids focused on what's the task and what am I learning that will help me answer that. So even though it's incremental, they realize each thing that I've learned is something else that's going to help me with this big question at the end. So those kind of supporting things. And we talked about exit tickets. In the middle of the class, you can stop an activity that we just finished an activity. Before we go to the next, I want you to write a 1-minute essay or a 2-minute essay where you're summarizing. If you had to tell someone else, if you had to tell next year's students about this, what would you tell them? 1-minute essay. So these are all metacognitive things where they're thinking about their thinking, and it supports them in making that transition. One of my favorite lessons and one of the kids' absolute favorite lessons is in the middle of the semester when we're going from after the Civil War into the second half of American history curriculum. We do this thing called His Death Avenged. I don't know if any of you have ever run across this, but it was actually put together by a teacher originally from Montana, who teaches at Shanghai International School and teaches APUSH there. And it's just a collection of primary sources using the Chronicling America website. So it's all newspapers from the time period, along with a few visual things like a fire insurance map of the town so that they can see how the town was laid out. Helena, Montana, I think it's 1869 or 1870. I'll have to look at it to refresh my memory on the exact year, but it's right around there. And there's a tombstone for John R. Bitzer. It just says, "Here he lies, his life cut short, his death avenged." So we start with kids like, what do you think happened? Based on what, before we teach it, what you think you know about the West. Who was Bitzer? Why was he in Helena, Montana? And what could have happened to him? And I love the kids that are like, dysentery. He died of dysentery. So how do you avenge yourself against dysentery? But it's those kinds of questions that make them think a little bit more, but are also like fun and low level. So the event has only been researched by one historian, and it was peripheral to their main argument. So they say there's two versions of events. And one, Bitzer's the hero who was trying to bust up a domestic dispute between Chinese immigrants, a husband and wife, and he got shot because of it. In the other version of events, Bitzer busted into the immigrant cabin looking for some enjoyment late in the evening. And Aunt Joe came home and found Bitzer with his wife. The implications are that there's possibly a rape, but there's also the possibility that she was working to pay the bills because Aunt Joe, her husband, was crippled and had been sick. So they're already getting like, what was life like for people in the West? Aunt Joe killed this guy. What was the justice system like in the West? There was no justice. It was a vigilante system. He was captured and hanged. Which version of events do we believe? What are the holes in the story? They get to the end and they don't know the answer because the primary source record is incomplete. And they think that I know, and they're like, so what really happened? You know as much as I do. And they find it both incredibly, interminably frustrating and the coolest thing they've ever done all year. And they talk to me about that day at the end of the year. We spend the whole class period, an hour and 20 minutes with them just in their teams, looking at these 15 primary sources and trying to figure out the story. So it's a low impact way. There's not a test coming out of this. They're not writing a paper that's for a major grade. It's a low impact way halfway through the course for them to just see how much they've learned that they're now capable of doing that they didn't even realize they were capable of doing. I couldn't have given them those primary sources on day one, and they couldn't have made heads or tail of it. So having that conversation after is important. So with the 1 to 2 minute essays, and a lot of people, do any of you teach heterogeneous courses where you have like academic level and honors level students together in the same class period? And you can give me like the thumbs up, the icon, the whatever, the reactions, that's the word for it. We use Google Meets, not Zoom, so Zoom is new for me. We have the heterogeneous classes here, is why I ask. So that differentiation piece is really important. So with those 1 to 2 minute essays, those are their own reflection for their own thoughts. Those aren't something that I'm collecting. Those are something that will then debrief out loud. So however much they get written, I try to make the question that they're responding to simple enough to where they can do it in a bullet list if they want. They can, you know, just the kids who like to write can just take their time and write. But whatever format you want to write your ideas in, to kind of adjust for the different levels of ability in the classroom, I give them that freedom. I'm sorry, Pepsi's fighting back. I give them that freedom to respond in the ways they want, so that at the end of it, even if they only have a couple of ideas jotted down, when we debrief it as a class, something that works with Think, Pair, Share, no matter when you are doing it, you should be wandering and listening to what the different pairs are saying. Identify your kids that are struggling. Listen to them, find that kernel of good stuff that's in it, and say, hey, that you just said, say it to me again. Okay, that's good. Say it back to them. So what you're saying is X, Y, and Z. I really like that. That's really insightful. I'm going to call on you first. Say exactly what you just told me. And then when you go to do the whole group, say, hey, all right, so this is an interesting question. And as I wandered around, so-and-so over here had a great response. Will you share what you were saying first that we talked about? And they already know what they're going to say. They already know the answer. And you verified it for them, and you helped them clarify it by stating it back to them. And so they're happy to share it with the rest of the class. That kid who couldn't get it all down in writing, who struggled with it, I have dyslexia, so I get that. The kid who struggled with the words, struggled to get it written down, who reads really slow and writes really slow. So my class is organized in teams of 4, and I try to keep the ability grouping kind of, you want a range, but you don't want a huge range. So you want to have a little bit of a range of kids, and you know that this table over here is going to need a little bit more time, a little bit more support. So you just tell them, you go ahead and start working. I'm going to blab on and explain things a little bit more for the rest of them, but you can go ahead and start working. Just know that this year, as soon as I put the question up, go ahead and start thinking about it. For everybody else, you can eat up a little bit of the time with, you know, just filler. They don't realize what's going on. They don't, you know, and some of those other teams will say, oh, they're writing. I guess I can go ahead and start writing my thoughts. That's fine if they do. Using a timer, and I use a stopwatch timer, and I tell them I'm going to give you 2 minutes and start it. 2 minutes, go. And that stopwatch timer really helps me keep the class on track, because I can get stuck in a conversation with a team and not realize that I've really given them way too much time, and other teams are through and they're doing whatever. And we're wasting precious class time. But using the timer helps them kind of learn, I have this much time to do it. What am I going to be able to do in that time? If it's not a full essay, I'm not turning it in anyway. I just need to get my thoughts down. Does that answer your question, Hardy? Is that helpful?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Good. And another thing that can especially be helpful with that is if we call it seed writing. So plant your seed. Then on your blog tonight, you're going to grow the seed. So plant the seed is what am my general framework? What am I thinking of in response to this? Some of those higher flyers will kind of write their whole blog almost. Some kids who are struggling, as long as they're getting the framework of their idea, they're in a good place so that on their own time at home or whatever, they're writing their blog. And I make sure to keep the blog requirements short. Just one paragraph is what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for you to spend all night on this. One paragraph, and it's your thoughts. It's your interpretation. It's based in and supported by the documents, by the literature, but it's your thoughts. In my American Indian Studies class, we use a variety of literature because it's a mix of anthropology and sociology and history, and we're looking at like we do a novel, and we do a number of short stories in there, so we're bringing in that kind of literature. We also listen to music and that sort of stuff. Hey, talk to your principal. That's what I did. Talk to your principal and say, this is really important. It's in the state standards. Talk to your district level curriculum support for social studies or for English and tell them, hey, get this added to our district curriculum guide. It's in the state standards. And just put together the package and say, this is how I would like to teach the class. And then if you get approval to add it to your course offerings the next year, start recruiting kids. Like the kids that you know would like it, would be great at it. Start recruiting, sign up for this. You really want to sign up for this. It's going to be a great class. And in that class, there's no tests. It's all authentic assessment. No tests, no quizzes, no textbook, but they are reading their butts off in there. It's just not a traditional textbook. They're reading primary sources, and they're reading literature, and they're reading lyrics, and they're reading essays and all of that. So it's a great experience for me, and hopefully a great experience for the kids. All right, let's talk about a couple of do's and don'ts when you're adding voices, because part of what we're also looking at with these is the fact that we can increase equity. We can add other voices to this chorus that makes up the histories of America. So things that you should avoid. That old problem of making a very, it becomes the after school special, talks about this topic, but it never made it into school. It becomes the very special page in the textbook. Like, you were there too. And that seems, condescending to kids. They see that it's singled out and it's like, oh, I got my token. Okay, great. So make sure that you're not separating marginalized voices. Like, now we're also going to hear from these people. Binary constructs. Debate, be really careful with debate in your class and make sure that you're framing debate that there's not this side versus that side. It's not just two opposing viewpoints, because then it becomes right and wrong and I have to win. You want it to be a critical conversation. So if you are doing a class debate, do the prep work ahead of time and make sure that you're putting kids either individually or in small groups. Make sure that you're checking in with them, the arguments that they're developing, that you've got a spectrum of points of view on it. That's why we start with the historians and the historiography at the beginning of each unit, so that they see, academically speaking, there's a variety of points of view. English people, literary analysis, start with 4 passages. You can get them all on one page, 4 passages from 4 important literary critics, their take on this short story. Each one kind of sees it a different way. Hey, So it's up for interpretation. My interpretation still has to be grounded in the facts, still has to be supported by plausible historical analysis, still has to be supported by quality literary analysis, but it's open for interpretation. So avoiding those binary constructs, avoiding using differential language. Textbooks are really bad about this, but also somebody mentioned Sheg. Love Sheg, but they're still working on this when it comes to indigenous issues and American Indian issues, where European colonists were soldiers, Indians were warriors. Aren't warriors just soldiers? Aren't soldiers just warriors? Make sure that you're not using differential language. Be careful about the language that you're choosing, that you're not creating false differences that didn't really exist. Whig history, the way it turned out is the way it was always going to turn out, the way it had to turn out? Well, no, absolutely not. Everything turned out the way it did through a massive conglomeration of happenstances. So make sure that kids are embracing complexity, that when you're adding voices, that it's adding complexity in a good way, that it's adding nuance, historical nuance, nuance to the topics and issues that you're dealing with in those thematic questions in your English classes. One of the best ways to do this is explore counterfactuals. Again, in the American Indian Studies course, when we're doing colonization and conquest era, there's this great counterfactual essay that's about 10 or 15 years old at this point. That's basically, what if there had been no Indians? How would European colonization of North America proceeded if there had been no Indians? The way this historian traces it is not necessarily how it definitely would have happened, but it's a good thought exercise in like, what are the possibilities? And that there are multiple possibilities. So quick first lesson activity. I've got 10 minutes. There's a link on your Padlet for the whole conference. And this is what it's to. So it's another one of these heuristics for comparing the civil rights movements. Within the heuristic is a link to the primary sources. It's these 4 short sources. So if you were looking at nonviolent African-American civil rights, normally you would hear Martin Luther King Jr., North Carolina's Pauli Murray instead. If you're talking about Black Power, Black Panthers, and a different approach in the African-American civil rights movement, normally you'd have Huey Newton, Stokely Carmichael. Well, instead we have Angela Davis. For farm workers movement and Hispanic American movement there in the late 60s, early 70s, normally you get Cesar Chavez, but just as important and central was Dolores Huerta. And American Indian movement, American Indian rights, instead of Russell Means, we've chosen Madonna Thunderhawk. They're doing the same thing that those voices we always hear from. They're articulating what their movement was about and what it wanted. And that's exactly what the kids are looking for. So in those passages, what are the similarities in the problems they were facing? What were the differences? What were their similarities in their opinion on mainstream culture? What were the differences? What's their opinions on integrating? Like, do they want to integrate? Or do they want equality? But, you know, if you're thinking like the Black Panthers and a lot of what they were looking for was not integration, definitely not the way Martin Luther King was saying it. If you're looking at Madonna Thunderhawk, she doesn't want integration. She wants to be left alone and for government to stop meddling in Indian affairs in negative, counterproductive, and exploitative ways. So they're wanting different things. The different wants are going to lead to different methodologies in creating change. And that's what this is helping students get to, along with a follow-up discussion after it. So this is one way that you can add voices. This is part of a unit. in a civil rights area. This is part of a day. This isn't the whole lesson or a whole lesson plan. This is a lesson activity, one way you can integrate and use primary sources. So as I talked about this, there's a couple of built-in things. There's a heuristic and there's the background information. But over here on our Padlet and the debrief of activity 1, besides those things that are built in, what are some other things that we've talked about so far that you think would be helpful in making this sample lesson a more positive learning experience for students? And you just pop those in the chat on the Adding Voices Padlet there. The relationships piece is so important and so central. If you're checking in with kids ever so often, like in the sports and what kind of books do you like, those sort of things, especially in the English classes, but also in the social studies classes, you can shape your topics and you can shape the voices that you're including to reflect those, and it's more personal form. Yeah, Kahoot game to review those good reviews after you've talked about it. Yeah, modeling it. So if this were earlier in the semester, I would be going through it with them. By the time we get to the civil rights movement, we're later in the semester because we're using a chronological structure still instead of thematic. And so usually when I do this one, they're doing it a little bit more on their own, but modeling has definitely come ahead and preceded this. Anything else that we've, oh, there we go. Yeah. Talking about service learning, talking about project-based learning where you're building a project that interfaces with the community. Good ideas, guys. So let's look at one more lesson activity. I've got time, barely. This one more lesson activity. So this one's a different structure, different kind. This is a discussion-based thing. So students are engaging with a collection of secondary sources and primary sources. The issue here is representation of Indigenous peoples. Then to craft, okay, my dyslexia got in this lesson as then to craft. Oh, and that is one of my pet freaking peeves. I apologize. That is such a pet peeve of mine, Dan, instead of then. But you know, crazy things happen when you're typing at 10:30 at night. Then to craft an initial response and a set of class discussion questions. So they're generating, I'm not giving them a question, I'm giving them a topic. They're researching the topic and then they're generating the question. So again, this is late in the semester for these students. My timer just went off. That could be bad. So specifically in this one, I've included one source. So when we're talking about expanding the chorus, it is a chorus. That last lesson had all 4 voices from women that typically don't make it in, but a chorus has a lot of voices. So a lot of those voices that we've always talked about are still there. We're just adding to it. So in this one, I added a local lens through this particular speaker. It's going to personalize the topic and bring in a local North Carolina kind of perspective on it. It's a female voice again, increasing our representation, our inclusivity, and it's an Indigenous voice so that they're getting to consider a point of view that they hadn't previously considered. So this uses a discussion board called Parlay. Love, love, love this discussion system. You get some free ones that you can build. I have a link there on the main Padlet for the session to this. And it also, this is the link that it generates that you can share with kids. So if you wanted to go to parleyideas.com, if you can't find the link and just type in that code, it will take you to this discussion. But in the discussion, I give the kids their goals. I give them all the content that they're going to be considering, and then they need to reflect on these things and craft a 2 to 3 paragraph reflection and 2 to 3 high quality. And by this point, we've been spending some time in class teaching them how to write questions, how to write their own questions and ask each other questions. So the way this works is when you submit your first post, your first response, you can't see the whole discussion board before you do your first one. So your initial response has to go in before you can see the discussion board. After your initial response goes in, it opens up the whole discussion board for students, and they can then respond to each other. And I ask them to respond to and contribute at least 5 more posts where they're asking questions or supporting or extending. But the big thing I wanted to point out here is this newspaper article about the debate in Greensboro. This is from 2004. The debate at that time was a little bit more like, are we or aren't we? Eventually, you're familiar with the history in that area. They did change the school mascots away from Indian mascots, but at this time, it was a proposal. And Ruth Revels, longtime American Indian activist, said the board needs to talk to local American Indians. So you've got a couple of different points of view here, but you're primarily singling out, what is Ruth Revels' argument here? What is she saying to it's legacy? Yeah, but whose legacy? It's respect. So you respect the devil because of the Duke Blue Devils? How is she answering people's traditional supports of using Native American mascots? So this is a local voice. If you're not familiar with Ruth Revels, she was a longtime indigenous rights activist in North Carolina, formed the Greensboro American Indian organization for kind of a pan-tribal group for urban Indians in the Greensboro area, and was former Governor Pat McCrory's English teacher. And so he really talked her up during the campaign and appointed her to some government positions afterwards. So she's since passed away, but it's a local voice, an indigenous voice, and a woman's voice to add. So we're adding a voice to the narrative. So when you're thinking about a discussion like that, over here on the Padlet, and I'm going to grab my timer, over here on the Padlet, I was going to ask you what were some of the good things, the potential good things, and the potential pitfalls. I'll let you respond to that because you'll have access to this Padlet after if you want to share your thoughts. But I want to really quickly, before we get out of here, having some standardized way that you always analyze everything. Even when you've advanced past it, it remains in the background. Like for those of you who teach APUSH, you're using HAPP or HIPPO or HAPPY, it's the same thing. They're analyzing for the historical situation in which the document was written, the intended audience, the purpose of the document, and the point of view, which is both who wrote it and what was their opinion on the issue. And kids know that when they get to any of these, we're doing that explicitly in the first couple of weeks together and then independently and sharing it out. And then they know when we get later in the semester, if they're struggling with a document, go back to those 4-factor analysis. So having some sort of a standard analysis that you use in your class that kids can always fall back on to start their analysis is important. But some of the ways that you can add voices, perspectives around tables. So literally tape to the tables, primary sources from different perspectives, and have teams circulate and they're recording what was this person's perspective, what was that person's perspective, and then we're discussing it at the end. Source curation. They showed you the Digital Public Library of America where you can curate sources, and the Library of Congress, you can curate sources. By the end of the semester, that's a great cumulative project. Give kids, and you can rehearse it in small steps along the way. Give kids like 7 sources, which are the 3 most critical to understanding this topic? Which are the three most critical to answering this historical question? Which are the three most critical to addressing this literary theme? And then having them, of course, DBQ essays and activities, having them do larger things like digital portfolios that they're collecting through the semester, podcasts based off of the work, vlogs, those sort of out of the box things kids love to do. And it's still a great way for them to show their learning. Blogs, I use blogs. I've talked about as they have like 2 posts usually a week based on things that we're doing in class, and it's a way for them to catalog their thoughts and their learning through the semester. Curated source files. So here's our topic. I'm not writing the whole paper on it this year or this grade level or this semester, but I am curating sources and saying how they would be useful to answering this. So just that skill separate out on its own. Annotated bibliographies that you did at grad school, you can do a high school version of those. Those are important. So I do want you at some point, if you can, tell me what was sticky for you today, what stuck with you, and you can do that on the Padlet over here. But I have gone over my time, and I thank you so much for your attention and listening to me yammer on. If you have any questions, if you want anything, any more information on this, there is my email. Feel free to reach out to me and I will do what I can to help you. Hopefully you guys are about wrapped up for the year. I've still got 2 days. So, thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Mr. Hutchison, for sharing that just amazingly rich and detailed presentation with everybody today. You know, there were just a number of notes that I made. I mean, I was writing everything down because I just thought I can use this in my educational practice as well. And it was just exciting to kind of get reacquainted with old ideas and get some new ones. And, you know, I love that you said, these are things that resonated with me, celebrating the struggle and embrace the complexity. And I think that's really like so important for kids and all learners of all ages, that learning is not without struggle. And, you know, we should acknowledge that it is uncomfortable to learn and challenge. And I just like how you called it celebrating it. That's awesome. The going through the metacognitive processes and how to think about thinking and to develop that awareness. Critical thinking systems. I loved what you said about the historiography discussions and activities, and bringing the idea that there are different perspectives, there are disagreements, there are conversations in the written record that are really important to understand. And I love the parlay. I'd never seen that before. That's really cool. I could see how we might use that. So again, we really appreciate you taking your time today, and look forward to seeing you know, what was sticky and resonated with the teachers, and to hear that. So thank you again. And we are going to take a 10-minute break before we let you come back for the last hour and 20 minutes of the day. And we'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So hope that you are enjoying the day. It is now down to our last kind of interactive session for the day before we wrap everything up. Hope you've had a chance to stretch and get yourself together. We're actually going to be doing an interactive activity for this last part, where we're going to break you into groups for some discussion and to discuss really how you plan on using all of this information that you've learned. So you're actually going to be in groups with each of your schools. So your school librarian or CF, your ELA, and your social studies teacher, if you're all here, will be included in the groups. And we put just a few things down here for you to kind of reflect upon. On the far left side, you'll notice there are some instructions, and it talks about what you need to do during this time. We want you to choose one person who's willing to just type things into the Padlet, so you all don't have to do that unless you want to. And then we also want to have you choose one person from your group to share out. Kind of what are your thoughts about how to collaborate at your school building and utilizing these resources with your students? What are your thoughts? What are your plans? How are you going to utilize your school librarian maybe to do this type of thing? And so take those ideas, those thoughts, and ponder those. You may also want to spend some time looking at the resources. So if you want to go back to the main page and pull up any of the resources that Kelly has shared with us today and play with those a little bit. You know, she said if you wanted to do a deeper dive, we would give you time. This is your time to do that. So again, to do that, when you click on that main picture at the front, you will see all of the different resources that were here today, and you can click on those and go right in and learn more. Okay, so again, I'm going to fix that real quickly, but you'll go right back to this session. If you click on Kelly's LibGuide, it has all of those resources that she covered all right here for quick and easy access. So I wanted to make sure that you can get to that and get to that easily. Okay, are there any questions before we move further? Any questions? No questions? Okay. All right. Enjoy this time with your group. Review those different resources. We will look for your takeaways. You notice at 3:10, we'll give you 3:15 at this point. We'll come back to the main group. Make sure that you share your video so that you can talk with your schoolmates personally. One of you may want to share your screen. You will have the ability to do that. But I do want to make sure that you go to this particular session. I'll put it in the chat box. Make sure that you go to that particular session before we put you into groups. I don't want you to kind of lose the link. So I'll give you a second to do that. And then I look forward to hearing your feedback and your takeaways once we close the groups. Again, 3:15, we will close the groups, okay? Everybody feels good? All right, thank you, Hannah, for your response. I'm sending you to your rooms.
Hi, we are supposed to go to our own schools group. Is that correct?
Yes. Did I put you in the wrong group?
It's showing High Point Andrews instead of Central, so that's why I didn't join.
I have two Andrews. I put High Point Andrews and I put Andrews. That is on me. So go ahead and join, Hardy. You are in the group.
Okay, it's the same one. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I'll fix it if it'll let me. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
No problem. Thank you.
Lisa, I'm sorry it kicked me out for you. Tell me again what school you're at.
I'm at Andrews.
Gotcha.
The real Andrews.
The real Andrews. There you go.
Okay.
Kathleen, you and Kelly, I put you in the district office / grant team breakout so that you guys can chat.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that. I didn't know whether you really wanted me in there or what was going on. So I thought I would.
Okay, I gave you a special space.
Oh, I thought I'd hang around and ask.
Some of the skills that we do a good job of emphasizing in our AP courses are not really being emphasized in our honors courses, but yet probably should be, especially when it comes to the analysis of primary sources. I think that we all appreciate why this is important, but we also don't see students coming in with that skill set, and so it often gets forgotten. We also talked about, because time is such a factor for us, and so when you get into the school year and it starts to become a pressure cooker of pacing guides and testing, you forget about the more active learning, because you are it's very teacher controlled because you're trying to work so quickly. And so our takeaway was just talking about that importance of the active learning, letting the student, giving the control back to the students and letting them kind of move through the complexity of different sources. Ideas that we talked about, Ms. Garcia talked about wanting to use the blog idea that had been mentioned. The collaboration, trying to have more collaboration between teachers and our media specialists, because we know that there would be primary sources that we could look at in a social studies classroom from a historical perspective, but that could also be analyzed from a literary perspective. And if we were maybe coordinating to do that at the same time with some of the same students, would that help add more value to it for them? And I think that was really all we discussed.
Sure, and I think what you're talking about too is that whole ability to engage the learner through the inquiry process. That through our current testing system, it's kind of eliminated, isn't it? And that's where we find the bulk of the understanding and the higher level thinking skills for our students is there. Our attempt to prepare them, expectation, we're leaving out what really teaches them, So I think as an educator, I've always had that battle about how we can do this. So I think by having some of the resources that were shared today, and I loved Shanda's experiential kind of learning that he shared with us, I think we're able to see that it is possible, but it takes more effort. And we're going to have to work a little harder at that. So hopefully this collaborative team will get you guys thinking over the summer to prep for next year. You think it may?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think if anything, it's just given, at least myself, I'm sure Ms. Garcia would agree, it's given us maybe validation to be more vocal about when we take the time to do this, because I have a unit at the beginning of my honors history courses where I go over the historical thinking skills and I try to give them the skills to do this, but I had to justify that, in my evaluation conversation, because that unit's not really on my pacing guide. And so I remember at the time having that conversation, wondering, am I doing too much here? But then to come to professional development such as this and kind of get validation that, no, that's probably a good thing to try to champion at your school, I think will give me more confidence next year when it comes up again.
Well, now you've got a team you can stay together, right?
Yes.
Stay together for that.
I concur 100%.
Good. Thank you guys for joining us from Andrews. I think it's a wonderful school. Brenda will tell you, I've been there quite a few times and enjoy being with your people. So thank you very much. What about Smith? Who's going to share with us from Smith?
We sort of went off on a tangent because we took all the
at everything that we heard and decided that we were going to do a immigration collaborative project across an English and a social studies class, and listen to some oral histories and some other resources, and possibly do our own oral histories, you know, interview people in the community and do that as a writing project at the end.
Well, I think that's a great idea. Smith has a huge history and alumni. What a great way to pull into that in your local area. So if this has started some collaborative inquiry kind of opportunities for you and your social studies and ELA team, that's perfect, Chauncey. I haven't gotten to meet you yet, so it's a pleasure to get to meet you. Are you enjoying Smith?
Yes, I started right before COVID hit, so I haven't got to see much in terms of people except online. So
this is good. So maybe it's opened a door or two. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Let me do that. All right. From High Point Central, who's going to share from us? Hardy or Heidi?
I am. And so among some of the main takeaways, we really appreciate using photos or historical documents, and particularly putting them sometimes side by side for comparisons. And definitely felt that the documents that we explored today were very engaging and ones that students would also find engaging. We also appreciated exposing students to less common biographies and even trying to find folks who are local and also representing different ages even, and you know, felt that both of our first two speakers did a great job of highlighting ways to do that in interesting ways that capture the full complexity of people, and certainly critically analyzing the 5 W's and making sure that our students are aware of the importance of doing that. We felt for incorporating in classrooms, you know, just finding what sources to use and then sharing those, you know, not just with our students, but with our own staff members, and integrating instead of presenting something separately, to try to integrate it more. We felt like that was something important. Pulling text to analyze and to use is important, and we also, in addition to finding the sources to share with our students ourselves, also, you know, maybe reaching a point where we challenge the students to find sources to share, you know, that they seek out and discover. And we appreciate, you know, the messages about lifting individuals out of the shadows, dealing with complexity, contradictions, and intersectionality. You know, we felt like those were important lessons to use. And then we felt like sharing, you know, with Mrs. Heidi Cadmus, our media specialist, you know, can definitely make sure that our different departments are exposed to this information. And one question I'd like to ask is, are we allowed to share what you shared with us directly?
Yes. The goal is to be kind of that teach the teacher model. We're hoping that we have, to have a little fun with this, infected you with the desire to want to share this information, right? We want you to share it with other teachers in your building, expose them to these different resources so they can use them with their students. I liked what you said, Hardy, when you talked about getting information from your students. So that's empowering them to have ownership of their own learning. And so by you doing that, by you encouraging that and facilitating that with your students and your teachers and discussion, then that's a way to spread that around. It's a way to elevate the level of learning and understanding of your students And it's a way to help and motivate that integration of ideas, right? Just because it's history doesn't mean it's not relevant to the learner. And so by incorporating them in that, you're doing that. You're elevating that ability, I think. It's the way I'm going to define that. So wonderful. It sounds like you and Heidi had some really great conversations, Hardy.
Definitely, we did. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, Northwest. Who's going to share with us from Northwest?
All right, that's going to be me.
All right, thank you, Scott.
I'm Scott Walker. Thank you. All right, well, so, I'm sorry. One of the things that we have actually previously discussed, but came back to in our discussion today, is the idea of creating, and this is something that Hardy was just talking about from High Point Central, but student curated digital library. So we want students to do their independent research, and then we want to create the sort of research community where students don't just say, hey, I went to this website, but they say, I found this article, they've annotated it, this is how it can be used, and to have that perpetuate itself eventually. In the sense that as a teacher, I don't necessarily want to have to make it an assignment all the time or make it graded work, but I want students to be engaged with that. And I want them to go to that on their own, eventually after we kind of get something like that off the ground. So Colleen Pinion and I were talking about how we realize one of the things that this workshop has helped me realize is that even though I do a lot with research methods, I teach AP language, I do research methods, and I try to have some scaffolding, and I have a lot of resources for students, but I feel like I need that to be much more robust, and we need to start earlier. So we also liked and wanted to borrow the idea of the fake news boot camp as kind of a way in, like a way to access this whole process. So we talked about those things, and we like the idea of using music and songs as primary sources. And we like the idea of tying that to the civil rights era. And we talked also about how, you hear teachers say, or you hear, especially university professors say sometimes that high school students aren't taught to think critically, or they don't come to college with critical thinking skills. And I think that might be true to a certain extent, but we also talked about how we think it's actually more so that they have trouble transferring knowledge from one context to another. So they can do the critical thinking when they're just in an English classroom, but when their science teacher asks them to write an essay, they kind of lose focus, right? Or their math teacher wants them to do a research project, and they don't even think to transfer those language skills into that, right? So we talked a little bit about how we need to build a kind of scaffolding around that idea of how we know they can think critically, they're really smart, but can they actually take what they learn in one class and apply it in a situation independently? We need to build some scaffolding around research methods to help them with that.
Well, I like your discussion about language and vocabulary. This particular opportunity, we hope, is giving your ELA, your social studies, your librarian teacher, your librarians, all that same language to use with students. So they're not only hearing it in ELA, or they're not only hearing it in social studies, but they're hearing it from everyone. And I think that's a way to help scaffold that, because when they do get in science class, they do forget. You're exactly right. And it's because they're not hearing it in any other place. We've done some work with, in Guilford County, Natalie's group, with school librarians with, okay, what do kids need to know about research in middle school? Are we preparing them in elementary for middle school people? Are we preparing them for high school? And we've even brought in university and community college librarians and say, what can we do at the high school level to prepare them for the college level to think critically? So I'm so glad you and Colleen discussed that and put that together. And I do think a big piece of that is language. So if you're doing that where you are, and not just in your class, but in all your ELA and social studies classes, and Colleen sharing that with everyone that comes in through the library, we're going to disseminate that language and it's going to become more common to our students. So I think that's how we can start the process. What do you think, Scott?
That makes a lot of sense, especially because I'm a language arts teacher. I want to focus on language, right? So that hits all the bullseyes, I think, for me.
Well, and if we can start to think, I liked what Shanda said about kind of, do we have different groups, hybrid classes, right? If our social studies and ELA teachers can even think collaboratively across their assignments to where it starts in one and builds to the other class. I know not all kids are lined up the same, so that's really difficult, but it's a good way to at least start the conversation and prepare them for the next level. So sounds like you had great conversations, Scott. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see what you guys do at Northwest. All right, Paige, who's going to share with us from Paige?
I will. Yeah, we really enjoyed getting a second just to kind of group back together. The main thing that, like the struggle, honestly, that we are facing, that most other teachers in this PD are facing, is our kids don't have the same, sorry, my camera's not working.
That's okay.
We don't have the same, all their kids don't have the same classes as all the other kids. So while we might have two periods that can work together, it's not necessarily going to be the case that the kid in my English class has AP US history. That being said, we do now have the same bank of resources to draw from, and so we can set this expectation for kids that this is how you research across the disciplines. I do really like the idea of pairing my second period with the social studies second period, and we work together through a particular unit or over a topic. And then I think like the biggest benefit, or one of the huge benefits that will come from this, is that kids love to feel smart in the classroom. I know that my kids really like to be the history buff when they get to like give you all of this background information. And so I think, you know, as our schedules are finalized and we can figure out ways to work together, we're going to see more of that, which is hitting the social emotional learning our district is really, really pushing lately. And that's really important for their growth. So nothing but good stuff can come.
Well, I like what you said there about the kids love to be the expert. So how can we empower them to be the expert with the knowledge that we've learned today, right? And some of that is just, it's not just Google. We've got to expose them to other resources, do a deeper dive and learn at just a different level. So I think that's a huge piece of what needs to happen to enable us as the educator to empower our learners to take ownership of their own learning and to be that expert and to help them do that. So thank you, Hannah, for sharing.
Absolutely, thank you.
Ragsdale, our last high school, who's going to share with us from Ragsdale?
Hi, this is Colt Weaver from Ragsdale High School.
Thank you, Colt.
We talked about.
Oh, I know. You're the one with Pumpkin.
Yeah.
Pumpkin.
Thank you. Yeah, Pumpkin, the little dog. Colleen's seen Pumpkin. Colleen knows Pumpkin. We talked about how incorporating primary sources doesn't have to be very intimidating, that we can use like shorter samples. I'm coming from an ELA background, so my natural inclination is to, okay, we're going to include this whole thing, but we really don't have to do that. What we really liked was in that last session, there was the sources that were all just kind of like short paragraphs or quotes. And we talked about how that's a great way to incorporate more perspectives, get more voices in. That's something we plan to do. And any ways to break down primary sources that turn into actionable steps for students. So like getting them to writing, to synthesis, to a debrief discussion, any activity that moves in that direction is something we want to do more of. In addition to incorporating more research on the lower grades, we focus so much on just comprehending the reading on the 9th and 10th grade level that we sometimes lose sight of giving the students the ownership of the research process and kind of finding what they're reading to begin with. So those were some of the things we focused on the most. And at the end, we discussed ways for how our school can specifically incorporate our media specialists more often.
Oh, you have a beautiful media center at Ragsdale. Jackie's got a gorgeous place there. Kids should love to go. And I liked what you talked about. I think point of view is huge, right? No matter what age you are, getting that point of view perspective that from different researchers that Shanda talked about, even if it is in that short snippet, I liked that too. Sometimes it's just the volume that scares our students away. So if we can make it digestible for them, right? We can put it in that smaller format so that it doesn't scare them away before they learn the process. I think that's huge. And it does help create those actionable steps that you were talking about. And a word I like to use when dealing with primary source documents in particular is decoding them. You know, you can put one in front of a child and they're confused initially. They're like, okay, yep, I see it at face value, but they don't really see any deeper. So as educators, we get to take some of these resources and help them do that deeper dive into decoding them, into understanding not only the point of view, but the intent and what were they really trying to get at. I love some of those political cartoons, right? They're fun for discussion to be able to lay out there and do that. Well, Colt, thank you for sharing. I hope that you have, as a group, have seen some good opportunities and learned about resources that you've not learned about before. Kind of give me a little check mark or something in the chat box. Has anybody learned about a new resource that you didn't know existed or you hadn't used before? I'm seeing some checks, thumbs ups. Wonderful. Well, our goal is for you to be able to take the Padlet that we shared initially. It has all of those great resources. Just to kind of sum up what you've learned today, you have this, you have access to this, and it's here for you to share out, Hardy. Glad you asked that earlier. And they're here for you. So if you have questions, go to our contact area and information. You can contact any one of us. Our contact information is there, and we're glad to follow up with you on any questions you might have or resources you might need a little bit more information about. Kelly did just a phenomenal job, I think, of covering so many of the great resources that the State Library has to offer, as well as Jen really looking deeply at that information literacy part. You know, that is where we as educators have to begin, because they don't understand unless they know the process. So as educators, that's our job with our students, is to push that. So I want to say thank you to everyone for your input, your time, and your support today. I think we've had great conversation and interactive ability to connect on that deeper level. So I appreciate that and hope you've enjoyed some time to work in your school groups. We're a few minutes early, my team, so I think we can probably, I don't think anybody's going to be upset about that, if we move on to our next steps. I think we're going to have Kelly talk to us about our workshop survey.
Absolutely. And just to echo everything that Tammy said, and to thank you all for spending your day with us. We're very delighted to be able to bring this workshop to everybody. And we've also learned so much from you all and getting your perspectives to help us sort of, you know, bring that back into what we do going forward. And so we win too today, which is great. So one important thing that we really want to ask you to do is to fill out the workshop survey from today, to give us your feedback on what you really liked, what resonated the most with you, how you felt that, you know, it might have improved your confidence or your, you know, your skills and your knowledge going forward, and to share that feedback with us and let us know areas for improvement for us going forward. That'll be really valuable to us. And one of the goals of our grant is also to write a paper about the work that we've done and you know, the model that we've developed collaboratively and working with you all. And so this will provide us some important information. And the the last piece of that is that we would also like to follow up with you down the road next year, once the school year's gotten started again, and maybe you've had a chance to let these things percolate and develop some more ideas, and talk to your team when you get back at school, and consider again how the day and how the sessions and information may have impacted in real ways your work in the classroom and with your students. So we would love when we send that out to you. We know you're busy, but to take a few minutes and fill it out so that we can continue to learn more as well. So again, thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you all again, hopefully at some point down the road.
Okay, so we are now at the end of things for the day. So I want to go over a few other items that I want you to be aware of, or that we need to make sure that you complete, so that you can get everything, all the good things that are coming to you. Just because we are virtual does not mean that you won't get swag. In fact, everyone who has participated in this workshop today will receive a number of books that are related to today's content, including Dr. Leonard Rogoff's newest book, which he spoke about in his session today, Gertrude Weil, A Jewish Progressive in the New South. You'll also get a copy of one of the books that Dr. Valerie Johnson mentioned in her talk this morning, We Who Believe in Freedom, The Life and Times of Ella Baker by Dr. Lee Williams. And you'll also get a picture book about Ella Baker's life called Lift as You Climb, The Story of Ella Baker by Patricia Ruby Powell. So we're going to be sending you copies of all three of those books, each of you, directly. So it's very, very important that, that we have your mailing address. I believe in the PM sign-in sheet, if not, oh, the AM. Okay, thanks, Tammy. In the AM sign-in sheet, there is space for your mailing address. So if you did not fill out that AM sign-in sheet, please make sure that you do, so that we have somewhere to mail these books. We've got the books, we just need to get them into your hands. So that sign-in form is on the Padlet, as well as all of the other session information, slides, links, all of that stuff. And then in addition to those three books, you'll be getting a stipend of $150, and that's $150 take home. So we've included money over and above that will cover anything that's pulled out. So you will be getting that $150 take home for your participation in today's workshop. So we've gotten a lot out of you guys being here and participating with us today, and we want to make sure that you get a lot beyond just the 8 hours or so that you've spent with us today. So again, just make sure that any paperwork that Tammy has asked you to fill out is complete and correct to ensure that that stipend can get into your hands. I think that covers it in terms of swag and take homes and things like that, but I do want to make sure that all of you know that we're all completely available to you in whatever way you need from us beyond this workshop. You've got all of our contact information, as both Kelly and Tammy have mentioned. If there's anything that we at the State Library can do to help you, to partner with you, to connect you with resources in the future, or the partners at UNCG. We're all very, very happy to collaborate with you in the future and to exchange ideas and brainstorm, whether it's virtual, in person, whatever the future holds, robots, who knows. But we're resources for you beyond the resources that we've shared today. Before we go, does anybody have anything that they want to share, anything that resonated with them, or that they just want to mention in wrap up? Now is the time.
This is a super nerdy thing to say, but I really appreciate the way you put together the Padlet. That is the best use of a Padlet I've ever seen in my life. It is so organized. The whole session was organized, and I just really enjoyed it. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you for that feedback. Tammy is our Padlet guru, and pretty much everything that this group has done over the course of this 2-year grant project has been on Padlet. So that's nice to hear that that was the right resource to use. Thanks. Anything else before we wrap up?
One thing I was going to mention, Dr. Johnson, I think, mentioned Monica Roberts. And I think during that time discussed, fighting against the violence against trans individuals. And last night I found an article that was just published by Reggie Bullock, who is played basketball at UNC Chapel Hill and also now plays in the NBA. But his sister was trans and she was killed. And he also lost another sister to violence. And the piece is called, "I Just Want to Say My Sister's Names." And it's very powerful. And I know one of the things he talked about is, I think he had a real positive relationship with his sister, but said that after what tragically happened to her, it made him also wonder what he didn't know about what she went through. And it was just a real powerful, provocative piece, and about, the personal pain but also celebrating his sister's lives. It was something that, I thought people might be interested in.
Thank you for mentioning that and for sharing that with us. If you want to put it in chat, that might be helpful to folks, the name of that, so that they can follow up. But I think it highlights how many different ways the things that we're talking about, that we've talked about today, that that you can find in primary sources that are in recent or very distant past, can really resonate in things that are going on in our lives and our experiences and our students' lives today. So I think that's one thing that I enjoy most about working through primary sources with students is the discovery that that the historical experience is not that much different from the current experience. So thank you for sharing that link, Hardy. Anyone have anything else to share? Okay, I'm sure that we are all, it's been a long day. I'm sure that we're tired. We've got a lot to think about and unpack from the day. And I'm sure we're all very, very excited to get out 10 minutes early. So have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week. And if any of us can be of assistance in the future, we are very happy to be. So please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thanks a lot, everyone.